Hi, I'm Ray, welcome to my channel. I'm so happy you're here and I'm so excited for this video. I know what you're thinking. Isn't the newbie tag supposed to be your first video on YouTube? Fortunately, this ties in nicely with the first question on the newbie tag. So I feel like the normal way around is that people discover Booktube and then a while later they create their own Booktube channel. But somehow I managed to create my own YouTube channel and then a while later discover Booktube. So I guess this video is kind of the product of my epiphany, where I realised that there is actually a kind of name for and community of people who are making videos about books, which is what I have sort of been doing recently anyway. I love watching and creating videos about books. I love reading, obviously. But I think I've only just recently really become aware of Booktube as a specific kind of corner of YouTube, and also in the last couple of months kind of really got into it and realised that this is very much the niche in which I fit. To answer the question genuinely about why I started my channel, I started this channel a couple of years back. I'd started making videos just of holidays that I went on, just as a kind of memento for myself, and I found that I really enjoyed doing that, and so then I created a YouTube channel which was very much just a hobby. I think I made about 10 videos over the course of about 2 years, and I just make videos about things that I'm passionate about. I've kept them up, so if you're interested, go and see. I still care about all those things, and they will probably still feature from time to time in videos that I make, because I feel like one of the reasons that I love books is that there's just so much about being alive that I enjoy and love, and books are a way to access all of that and experience that more. But anyway, about 3 months ago or so, I guess, I decided that I wanted to actually start doing YouTube properly and posting regularly. Again, I didn't totally have a clear direction, but it just kind of turned out that like 80% of the videos that I made were about books, so I feel like I have kind of found a bit more of a sense of direction for this channel, and I thought I'd do the Booktube Newbie Tag to introduce myself and my reading interests. This is a tough question. I know for sure at the moment that I just haven't got a full grasp of Booktube and the scope and variety of it. So I feel like the things that I say, I'm very likely to discover that there's already people out there doing these things far better than I will be doing them. But I guess a couple of sort of niches that I'm more interested in are reading children's literature as an adult. I'm thinking particularly classic children's literature, something I really enjoy, get a lot out of, and advocate for more people doing. Another thing that I'm really passionate about, although I'm not quite sure how to put this across in video format, is kind of the interplay between reading and living, and sort of the lessons and inspiration that we can draw from, particularly from reading fiction. I just find it absolutely miraculous, the fact that every time you read a book, you basically get to experience another life, and then when you finish that book, you have that life kind of layered over your own one, and you have it as a different perspective through which to view the world. And literature for me has always been a way of understanding myself more clearly and understanding and empathizing with the world far better than I could otherwise do. So yeah, children's literature and the interplay between reading and life. I can also bring lots of enthusiasm, although I know that is absolutely not at all something new to Booktube. Two things. Number one is getting more involved in the community and getting to know the community. At the moment, like I mentioned before, I feel like I'm really new to this community. I feel like I haven't fully grasped it yet, and I feel like it's taken me a long time of being on YouTube to figure out that there are people who share my interests in terms of reading and whose content just completely kind of motivates me and inspires me and makes me love literature even more than I already do. So I'm super excited to get to know people better. Something that I guess I was afraid of in starting my channel in the beginning, and just generally in interacting more with regards to book-based social media, is that I worried that it would prevent me from reading as much as I was doing before, because I would kind of have to trade in the time that I would usually spend on reading for making and looking at YouTube videos and Instagram posts about books. But what I've actually found is that it's been the complete opposite, and I have never read more than since I started this YouTube channel, and I'm super excited to continue with that, and also to continue just engaging more closely and critically with the books that I'm reading. I read English literature at university, but since then, up until the point of starting this channel pretty much, I would read but not properly like reflect on what I read and think about it, and I have just enjoyed so much properly reviewing and engaging more closely with the books that I've been reading. Question number 4, why do you love reading? So I feel like this question is really similar to one that I absolutely adore, I might do a whole separate video on, which is just, why do you read? I had about an hour and a half's conversation with a friend about this once, and it turned out that the reason behind our reading so much was actually quite different for both of us. Why do you love reading, I feel, focuses a bit more on the joy side of things, and joy is definitely a huge factor in why I love reading. Quite a lot of what I read are books that make me really happy. I feel like they restore me, I feel like they re-energize me, I feel like they inspire me, and I just feel like reading gives my life a richness and a fullness and a magic and an escapism that doesn't really exist in quite the same way anywhere else. Reading also helps me to learn and grow. It's got me through some of the hardest, the lowest times in my life, and it's enhanced some of the best times in my life. Yeah, basically, reading is magic. Ever since childhood, I've always had this sense that the very core of my personality and who I am has been built and created bit by all of the books that I've read, by the characters I've loved and admired and treated as role models. And as I've got older, by the ideas that books have brought to me, the ways that I've changed and responded to those. Yeah, reading's made me who I am today, and it will make me who I am tomorrow. Question number 5. What book or series got you into reading? I am a primary school teacher, and putting my primary school teacher hat on here, I'm going to say all of the books that my parents read to me when I was little. Parents, read to your children. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir in this situation. But seriously, I'm aware that it's one of the greatest privileges in my life that I grew up in a family where I was surrounded by books, and reading was just always this special and wonderful thing. My mum read to me religiously throughout my whole childhood, like literally pretty much up until I left home to go to university. I remember being a teenager and she was reading Great Expectations to me. I have such fond memories of all of those times and all of those books that we read together. I think some of the earliest ones that I remember loving were the Narnia series, and it was particularly exciting because she had her old set of Narnia books from when she was a child, and they'd all been covered in brown paper in order to keep the covers protected, and for every new one that we read we got to unwrap the cover to see what it was like underneath, and that was so exciting. I loved those books. Going back even further, this was absolutely my favourite book when I was a little child, and I still adore it now. It's not that well known. I really wish that it were. It's called The Big Sea, and it's obviously a picture book with these gorgeous kind of moonlit drawings about this little girl who goes down to the sea with her mum in the middle of the night. It's just the most perfect depiction of the magic of the everyday. And there's this one bit in it which I think is like the most beautiful thing ever, where it says, "We didn't go to the town, we just stayed for a while by the sea. And Mum said to me, 'Remember this time, it's the way life should be.'" And it literally makes me cry every time that I read it. I used to love it as a child because I liked imagining that I was going down to the sea, and now I love it as an adult because I feel like it gets to the heart of what is important in being a human being who is alive, which kind of, I guess, backs up really nicely my answer to that question earlier on, where I said that the things that I would bring to this channel were a love of children's literature and a love of the way that reading kind of elucidates and interacts with the experience of being alive. Okay. Kind of didn't expect I was gonna cry because I was filming. Whoops. The final book that really got me into reading that I cannot miss is the book that got me back into reading. So I was a huge reader as a child up until about the age of 11, up until the end of primary school. Then I really clearly remember that when I went to secondary school, I just couldn't find any books that I liked between the ages of about 11 and 14. I found that the YA books that were on offer to me at that time kind of fell into two categories. They were either like a silly teenage diary, which I didn't mind but didn't want to read exclusively, or they were suddenly quite gritty and violent, and they dealt with these big problems in society because, you know, you were a teenager and you're old enough to cope with these things now. And I just so missed the children's classics that I read when I was younger. I now realise that I could have kept reading them, but I think I felt like I was too old for them, and so it wasn't acceptable that I read those anymore. But I also really clearly remember feeling that adult classics weren't for me, that I wasn't ready for them yet, and that I wouldn't understand them at all. But then, at about the age of 14, I read my first adult classic. It's, to this day, quite possibly my favourite book that I've ever read, and I think that partly links back to the kind of world-opening experience that reading this book was for me when I realised that I could access all adult classics. They weren't scary, they were wonderful, and I loved them. That book is Jane Eyre. You can see from the cover of this how well loved it was. This book meant everything to me when I was a teenager. Jane was an enormous role model in my life. She gave me so much strength, and I'm so grateful to her for helping me through my teenage years, because we all know that being a teenager is tough. And this book just completely got me back into reading. I just remember it being like a switch. I read this book, I could not put it down, and I hadn't read like that for years. After Jane Eyre, the floodgates opened and I just fell completely back in love with reading, and it's kind of never stopped since then. Question number 6, what questions would you ask your favourite booktubers? I guess having spent a few months trying to make YouTube videos as well as having a full-time job, how do you balance it is definitely a big question. Yeah, I would love to have a chat with them just about the process of what it's like to regularly make videos about books over a long period of time. And also I'd just love to get to know them. So I'll probably just ask them a lot of questions about themselves. Question 7, what challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be the hardest to overcome? I feel like I've already kind of addressed these. Time and consistency. I really want to produce at least 1 video a week, ideally 2. But balancing that with working a full-time job and also making sure that the videos I'm putting out there are actually good, that feels like a big challenge to me. Question number 8, when did you start reading? I think like a normal age, like around 5, whenever you were taught to read in school. I remember the joy of reading my first chapter book by myself. It was Fantastic Mr. Fox. I was probably around 6 or 7 at the time. I actually teach children who are aged 6 and 7 at the moment, and so a huge part of my job as a primary teacher is teaching children to read, and I just feel so lucky to be able to be the person who kind of introduces them to that magic world of reading. Mostly in this chair. And since I got a Kindle, I read in bed before I fall asleep a lot more than I ever used to. Question number 10, what kind of books do you like to read? So many. I definitely don't want to box myself off in terms of my reading. I am a mood reader, I read eclectically. The only genre that I have zero interest in is horror. Beyond that, pretty much everything interests me, and I try to read a range of stuff, and I definitely allow myself to read whatever I want to read. There are for sure some kind of core categories that I always come back to and that I read more of than I do of other stuff. One of them is classics, particularly Victorian literature. Is just something that I have always loved my whole life. I always go back to and enjoy. I don't know what it is about that time period. I've just always found it fascinating. I remember as a young child, half of my imaginative play was being a Victorian. For some reason I wanted to be a servant. I don't know where I got that romanticised view of life from, because I definitely do not want to be a Victorian servant anymore. Also, as I mentioned before, I definitely really enjoy and always come back to children's classics. I love uplifting and inspiring kind of comfort reads, like think Anne of Green Gables series. I love lyrical, beautiful writing. I love the kind of coming of age, Bildungsroman style novel. I love anything which I feel kind of offers insight into the kind of universal human condition. That sort of writing is wonderful to me. I quite like episodic writing, things that are quiet, stuff where not too much actually happens. I particularly enjoy writing that's kind of pastoral and set in the 19th or 20th centuries. So that stuff is kind of my comfort, familiar genre that I've already read a lot of and fall back on when I want something that I know that I'm going to enjoy. Then on the other hand, I also love reading books from different cultures, from different time periods. I'm always looking to kind of expand my vision with literature. So if you have any particular recommendations for authors from different countries, translated world literature is definitely an area that I would like to explore more. Please send your recommendations my way. And if you're interested in getting a clearer overview of the kind of books that I read, then feel free to check out my Goodreads. I've linked it down below. I've been using that for a few years now, and so that's quite a good place to see the kind of stuff that I actually read. That's all the questions. I really hope that you've enjoyed finding out a little bit more about me and my reading tastes. Like I said, I still feel quite new to the Booktube community, so please comment down below to introduce yourselves. And if you think any of my bookish interests sound up your street, I would love it if you would subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.